Hello, this is JB. I live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but today I'm going to talk about my Charlotte Hornets memories. So I grew up in North Carolina. It's a basketball state. I was a basketball fan, and I attempted to play basketball from a very early age, probably 4 or 5. And remember in kindergarten, I tried to, my talent at the talent show was playing basketball. Uh, and I ended up getting hit on the head by the basketball because I got excited after I made the first shot, and I threw the second shot really hard at the rim, and it bounced back and hit me in the head. But uh, in 1989, that was the first season of the Hornets, and they played at what they used to call the new Charlotte Coliseum. It was off Tyvola Road in Charlotte. And early on, I didn't get to go to many games because my parents weren't basketball fans, didn't have a lot of extra money, but I would watch them on WJGY TV 46 and Channel 55, whatever the call letters were, um, because we didn't have cable, so we couldn't watch them on Fox Sports or ESPN or whatever channel they were on. And of course, there was no internet back then in the early 90s. Um, but I watched some games, hoping like maybe once a week one would come on. And then like Saturdays they had a coach's show. Alan Bristow was the coach early on. Um, but remember in the late 80s or maybe 1990, I'm not sure. My dad, who still does tile and marble, he worked in Kurt Rambis's house. Kurt Rambis was one of the original Hornets, and he was a Laker before that, and then later on he went to coach the Lakers. He became really well known, but my dad worked in his house because they did a lot of homes of people who had money, custom homes in the South Charlotte uh, area of Carmel Road. It was over there in that area, but so I used to watch a lot of the games and talk with my friends about how the Hornets were doing. Uh, and then like we traded basketball cards, so we always tried to get the Hornets. So the Bulls were also really popular back then because obviously Michael Jordan, who was from North Carolina. Um, but I don't know what the year was. I didn't look it up, but at one point in the early 1990s, Larry Johnson, who was a power forward for the Hornets, he got at what was at the time the largest contract that any basketball player, maybe professional athlete, had ever gotten, and that was I don't know how many years it was, maybe like 7 years, $84 million or something. It was a lot of money, but just a fraction of what really good players can make now. But I remember I was throwing the football in the yard with my dad after work, and I said, "Hey, Dad, did you hear the news? Larry Johnson is going to get $84 million." And my dad, he said, "Good for him, but just so you know, Larry Johnson puts his jeans on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. He's no better than you. He's no better than anybody else. He just makes more money." And I've always remembered that. Larry Johnson was a lot better than almost anybody will ever be at basketball, but I took my dad's point. Um, and I remember, like, I don't know if it was before or after that, but my dad worked at Larry Johnson's house. He had a home um, near the across from McDowell Park at Lake Wiley, very large home, and he may still have it. I don't know. I hope not, because I don't want to give away locations. But a very nice home, and he worked there and put tile in there. But over the years, my dad also worked in Robert Parrish, the chief. He played for Boston Celtics for many years, and He also worked in the home of Cedric Maxwell, who never played for the Hornets, but he played for the Boston Celtics, and he played for the UNC Charlotte 49ers basketball team in the late 70s. But I remember very vividly, like when I was in second grade. This was 1993, I think. Uh, the Hornets made to the playoffs, and they beat the Boston Celtics in the playoffs. And Alonzo Mourning hit this famous shot, and it was a really big deal because the Hornets had never won a playoff game before, and they won that series, and they beat the Boston Celtics, who had won many championships over the years. Can't remember exactly how many it was, but they won a lot of championships, especially in the '80s when they had all those great players: Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, Cedric Maxwell, um, Kevin McHale, and I'm leaving some people out: Dennis Johnson, uh, and I can't remember who else. But lots of great players, lots of great teams, and a famous brand name. But they beat them, and that was a big deal. And then, I mean, the Hornets were generally pretty good uh, during my childhood, and I didn't. It didn't really matter to me, but because either way, I was pulling for the Hornets. That's the only team I knew because that's where I was from. But I remember I think I was in seventh grade, which was 1998, around there. I think I was in seventh grade. My dad worked on the same street that Dale Curry lived, and Dale Curry was this um, shooting guard uh, for the Hornets. He was really good at shooting threes, and he at one point won sixth man of the year because he wasn't a starter, but he was the next man off the bench. He was a really solid basketball player, but he was very popular in the community. I remember him being on like Burger King commercials, and so were his sons, and I'm going to talk about them in a minute. But Burger King commercials, and I used to have a poster on my wall of Del Curry that we got from school. I can't remember if it was, I can't remember which organization gave it out, but and they used to have a basketball from Burger King if you bought it or won it or something. It was called a DC 30 ball, and it was this color, teal and white, and it had a fake autograph of Del Curry on there, and everybody wanted one. But Del Curry, as a lot of people probably already know, he had two sons. He also had a daughter, but his two sons are well known to this day because, like their dad, they became basketball players. And one time, so I was in, like I was saying, seventh grade. I think it was seventh grade, and could have been ninth, but I think it was seventh. But my dad was working on the same street that Del Curry lived on, and this was near the Arboretum, right off of Providence Road. It used to be called Green Park Drive, but it's not called that anymore. It just uses Providence Road address, but it's a private neighborhood. But at that time, he had this. He doesn't live there anymore, so I feel comfortable talking about it. Uh, he had this very large house that was stucco, and it had those orange-colored roof tiles. It looked like it belonged in Florida. It didn't look like a North Carolina house, but it was a very nice house, very big one. And my dad was working at the end of the street, and sometimes when my dad didn't need my help, I would just go for a walk. And so one day I was uh, walking down the street, and I saw two kids playing basketball in the driveway where that home is, and it was Dale Curry or Stephen Curry and Seth Curry. Uh, Everybody knows who both of them are probably if they're watching this video about basketball. Uh, Stephen Curry, he went to play for Davidson, and then of course plays for the Golden State Warriors. And Seth Curry, he had a little bit harder time making it in the NBA. But he first played at Elon, and then went to Duke, where he was a very good player, and then eventually he made it to the NBA, and he does well now. Um, but they were uh, because of who their dad was, everybody knew who they were, and like when I walked by and I saw them playing, I didn't say anything. I just kept walking because if I had gone and tried to play with them, it might have caused a problem for my dad because like he was there to work, and I wasn't from that neighborhood, so I just let them play and watched for a second as I was walking by, kept on going. But I guess I saw them play before anybody else, or a lot of other people. But also throughout the '90s, another player that I almost forgot, Muggsy Bogues. Uh, he was at he was the shortest player to ever make it to the NBA. He was a hero to all of us people who were short and who were counted out because we weren't very tall. And because he, even though he was short, he was very good. He was good with the ball. He could dribble well, pass well, played defense. He used to pickpocket, steal the ball because he was so quick. He could just go grab the ball before the other guy knew he was there. Um, he was when you put him up against like a center at one time. He was with the Washington. They used to call it the Bullets, the Wizards. Now uh, he was on the Bullets, and Manute Bol, who's uh, maybe still the tallest player in the NBA, maybe not, but at that time he was. And so there's like this photo of the very tall man beside the very short man, and but uh, Muggsy was awesome because people like that idea of the underdog, a guy who you wouldn't normally think would win, having so much success. He was always a fan favorite, and he went on and had a really good career. Um, and he's, I guess, as far as the Hornets go, he's a legend, and I think he's an NBA legend too, just because, like, even if you weren't a Hornets fan, you could identify with him and his attitude and his positivity and um, his idea of not quitting, uh, of believing. They used to say "be believing" because the Hornet. But he gave kids, especially, but everybody, he gave them someone to look up to, even though you didn't really have to look up to him. Um, but I guess one other person, since I lived in South Charlotte when I was really young, along Carmel Road, he was the owner of the Hornets, this man named George Shin. He was a local businessman who ended up doing really well, even though he started out with almost nothing. And he bought the Hornets for like 30-some million and sold them for several hundred million years later. But he used to live off of Carmel Road, and so every time we would drive by, we'd see like he had a basketball court on the side of his house, a really big one, and I think full size. I don't know that, but I think. And so like because back then, Charlotte's a pretty big city now. It's not a big city, but it's fairly big. It's one of the larger mid-sized cities, and but back then it was much smaller, so it was pretty common to um, at least meet, not really meet, but like to come across um, players or people who were involved with the team. Like one time, me and my dad worked in a man's house named Spencer Stolpen. And he was one of the, he was the general manager of the Hornets at one time, but he was very instrumental in all the business operations of the team. He later ended up getting into some trouble, but we did that. But as a kid, like I had said before, we didn't have a whole lot of money. But my first Hornets game was, um, I think I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My dad got 5 tickets, which is exactly how many we needed because my mom, dad, brother, sister, and me. And we went, and it was the Atlanta Hawks. And I think this was before Dikembe Mutombo. But so we went, and that was like the coolest thing ever for me because the only time I had been in the Starlight Coliseum before that was, I think, one time we went to the circus. And because that's something the whole family could be entertained by. But it was really exciting for me because I was the basketball fan, and the family, my brother and sister, weren't really big fans. But that was awesome for me. I love that somebody, and like I said, somebody that my dad worked for gave him the tickets because they were going out of town and they weren't going to go anyway. And I wanted to go to every game after that, but of course I couldn't because my dad didn't have money. But then a couple of years later, we were at the Belk or the J.C. Penney, I can't remember, and we filled out this what do you call this, like a raffle. You put your name in there, and then if they draw your name, then you get tickets. So my brother's name was drawn, and uh, he was supposed to be, or the thing was that he got to be the ball boy. So he was down there like passing the balls around and cleaning the floor after somebody fell down and all that kind of stuff. And he didn't really like sports, but he did it, and we got the tickets. Me and my dad uh, went with him, and he says, I doubt this happened, but I mean, I don't, I think uh, if if he remembers this, then he's mistaken. I mean, because like this person was a basketball player for the Dallas Mavericks, who is like really well known and very well liked, and nobody ever accused him of doing anything wrong ever. Really good guy. And my brother said that that person spit on him. It could have been an accident if it did happen, and I really doubt it was on purpose because my this basketball player would have no reason to do that to my brother because my brother didn't do anything to him. And so, that I think if you know if it happened, it was an accident or misunderstanding. But he remembers that, and then I remember that like during halftime when he was supposed to be like cleaning the floor and stuff, he ran up and went to the concession stand and was eating some fries with us, and some other guy who I guess worked for the Hornets. He came in and was like, "Hey, you're supposed to be on the floor," and he's like, "Yeah, I'll go, but I'm gonna finish my fries." And that stands out as a funny memory. But later on, I think I was in seventh grade. I went to me and my dad went to a game, and it was the Utah Jazz, who were really good during the '90s, and they had Karl Malone, the mailman, and they had John Stockton. I like John Stockton because we kind of played the same kind of ball, like uh, really good with dribbling, passing, defense, tough, very tough. He was, and of course the mailman Karl Malone. He was a great player because he was so good on offense, but he was also built like a house. This guy was like really strong, and you wouldn't want to fight that guy. He'd break your leg. Uh, but so I remember like being excited to watch them. I was even more excited when at the very end of the game, Karl Malone missed the winning shot and the Hornets won. But throughout that game, like I didn't watch the whole game because I saw someone who's in my class. His name was Calvin Brown, same last name as me, but no relation. And me and him were like running around everywhere, just like having fun. And so we missed part of the game, but it was still fun to go to it. And then later on, a few months later, we went to watch the Washington Wizards. I think at that time they were called the Wizards. But before that, they were called the Bullets, like I said earlier. But we went to watch the Wizards, and that was right before a year or two before Michael Jordan became a part owner and played for the team. But to go to those games, other than when we got the free tickets uh, to the two games, like to the other two that I went to, like my dad, he worked all the time, but he just didn't have a lot of money. So like one time I wanted to go to a game, he said we don't have the money. So I went all throughout his truck and looking under the seats and finding a quarter here, nickel there, and then go to his change tray and in the console in the middle, looking all through there. And then I went to the house and did the same thing and said, "Hey, Dad, I found enough money. It's all yours, but it's enough." And he said, "Okay." And then we went and bought tickets, and we went to the game. Uh, we never, other than when somebody else paid for the tickets, we never had really good seats. Like we weren't sitting like down low where you can like, you know, hear the players talking. We were way in the top, but it was still like great memories to me, and it meant a lot because I know how hard it was for my dad to be able to go, and for my dad to just be able to sit there because he would have rather been at home watching TV. He didn't really want to be at the game. I wanted to be there, but he did not. And so he in a way, sacrificed. Well, he actually sacrificed and then kind of sacrificed for me because he paid money that he really didn't have, and he also sat through a game that he didn't want to sit through. But he did it for me, and so that was good. As a lot of people know, the Hornets left because of a bunch of bullshit with the former owner George Shin wanting a bunch of money from the city, and the city didn't want to give it to him, so he said, "Okay, bye," and went to New Orleans, and then he went down there, and then a few years later, a team called the Bobcats was started by Bob Johnson, who used to own BET, and it wasn't the same after that. Like it didn't have the same feel, the same excitement. Um, Bob Johnson is a very smart man, made a lot of money, but he didn't endear himself very much to the people, even though people respected him and everything that he had done, because he had an amazing career. And I imagine still does really well. But so he started that team, and then um, I used to go to some of those games because that was around the time I turned 18, so I could go on my own. And I would go to some of those games, and it was okay in the old Coliseum. And then I think I went to some in the new Coliseum that was built. They built a new Coliseum downtown for Bob Johnson. He helped get that built. Um, and But eventually, 2014, after I had been gone a few years, I moved back home. The Bobcats changed their name to the Hornets. So the Bobcats got the Hornets name, and so they just changed their brand. And when I lived there from 2014 16, I went to some games sometimes. Sometimes I would see people I knew there because I definitely knew a lot of people. But it was fun. I guess it was nice, like because I was uptown a lot anyway, so I would just go to the games. But it wasn't quite the same as when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I was younger and I hadn't seen as much, and so it was really exciting. But as you get old, the more you see and the more you experience, the harder it is to get excited. It just was that way. It's like, it's just a basketball game. It's just something to do. But I don't really follow the Hornets anymore. But if they're playing, I'll watch. Or every once in a while, I'll check up and see how they're doing. But it's not quite the same as when you're a kid. But I have a lot of good Charlotte Hornets memories, as you can tell. This video went long. But it was a good part of my childhood. But now I think I'm a lot more college basketball fan because it's much more accessible. Like there's only NBA teams in however many 30 cities, but there's college basketball in every city and most towns. And so, like if you just like basketball and you want to see a basketball game, it's a lot easier to find a college basketball game than a pro game, and it's even easier to find a high school game. I don't watch high school basketball, at least now. I did when I was younger, but I like college basketball because they're pretty much anywhere you go, no matter what level, even if it's Division 3. There's good basketball out there because those players have been playing basketball their whole life since they were like 5 years old, and they're like 18 to 22, so they've had a lot of time to improve and get really good. So I like to do that. But something that I always remember about my childhood is the Charlotte Hornets. I want to share those memories while I still have them. Thanks for listening.